Call to order the Westford Conservation Commission meeting for Wednesday, July 9th, 2025. This meeting is being broadcasted live by Westford Cable Access TV and recorded for playback online. While participating in this meeting, you're consenting to your likeness and audio being recorded and rebroadcast. So on the agenda, the 7 p.m. item is open forum. Do any members of the commission have something for open forum? Matt?
Just a small programming note, the 2 interviews with the candidates who've submitted volunteer activity forms for the vacant commission conservation commission position, those interviews will be held at the commission's next meeting on July 23rd, when both are able to attend. I know in previous meetings said it was going to be tonight, but got pushed.
Okay.
Terms, and that's really all I have for open forum.
Okay. Do any members of the audience have something for open forum? Okay. Our next agenda item at 7:05 is a request for Stony Brook Conservation Area use by Park Run. Good evening.
Good evening, good evening. Hi, nice to meet you all again. So I thought what we would do in this meeting...
Say your name just for the record.
Oh, okay. Lydia Mayer-Turkson and...
Stefan Gopal. Thank you.
Robinson Road.
Great. So if we could go to slide 13, Matt, that'd be great. So while you're finding that, what we thought we would do is just respond to some of the questions that have come in. I think the last time we spoke was April/May. So we thought we'd respond. The actions that we had were really in 3 main sections. The first was to run through the alternative locations to Stony Brook that we considered and some of the pros and cons of that. And we picked 4 locations, so we'll go through that. We also shared a copy of the potential approval letter and a copy of the insurance certificate from Park Run. So just double checking if there's legal counsel questions on that. And then I understand a letter of support was provided by the, let me get this right, Westford Land Preservation Foundation.
Yep.
Thank you. So Andrea Piranha-Sweet, yeah, Andrea Piranha-Sweet. So I thought we'd go through those 4 points in that letter. How does that sound? Is that okay?
That's fine.
Okay, great. So when we look at the locations then, what we did is just we evaluated 4 locations, and I'll go through the first 2 that are here, and then Stefan can go through the other 2 that we looked at that we didn't document, and give you some sense of what the deficits and or advantages were. So Greylock Pond had equivalent and great parking in Westford, but one of the challenges was narrow paths or narrow trails at some point. And the thing that was the real stop for Park Run was the access road at the end. You'd need 2 trips around the lake, beautiful lake. You need 2 trips around. However, at the access road, there are 2 sets of quite large boulders that block the path, and that could cause some risk when individuals try to go through the gaps of those boulders. So that was a firm stop that wouldn't pass the risk assessment. Grassy Pond is another one that we looked at out on, is it Plains Road? That would require about 3 trips around to make the 5K up. Very small parking, and there are exercise stops along the way that could make it difficult to again share the location with others who are stopping to exercise. The big challenge there, I thought, with a small parking area, people might want to park on the road and overspill onto the road, which again could be a risk as people then walk. You build up a series of cars parked there walking to actually get to the start. So again, based on that risk, the limited parking and the risk of overflow with cars, we thought that was definitely a stop. Stefan, do you want to pick up on the other two?
Yeah, so I can speak to Bruce Freeman Rail Trail and the W.A. Robinson, Robafui as they called it, trails, both of which are great for recreational use, but again, don't really fit the needs for what Park Run is looking at. I was going to use that as a guide. I guess I will use this slide to compare it to. That's okay. I was just going to run through some of the things that she used to evaluate those ones. So, I mean, again, both of them did have some highlights, but also some negatives that Stony Brook didn't have, and including a couple of what we labeled critical sort of stops or failures for them. So I mean, Bruce Freeman Rail Trail is great. I know it because I can use it for a walk with the dock, but walk with the dock has very different needs than Park Run. One of the big critical stops oftentimes for Park Run is the crossing over of streets. And so again, with walk with the dock, we do a much shorter distance, much smaller group kind of thing. And we're still crossing over, and I am frantically watching everyone as we hope traffic stops and stuff like that. But again, these are kind of hard stops for the Park Run sort of philosophy, but guidelines kind of thing. And so there's at least, I think, 3 road crossings on that. Again, as we'll see with some of them, it would have been conducive because you can do a nice, easy down and back. But as anyone that knows the Bruce Freeman Rail Trail, it can get pretty busy even on the trail too, with bikers and walkers going in opposite directions. It's pretty busy. But again, it's really the multiple road crossings that made it a critical failure for Park Run. The other one, the W.A. Robinson Trails, which I love, that's actually my backyard. That's where I do my trail running. Is great in some regards, but again has some weak points or critical failures in places. The trails are really narrow. There's a couple, if you're familiar with it at all, it has a couple bridge crossings in particular. One of the ones that you would have to use, I think, is actually one of the longest trail wood bridges in the Westford kind of park system, the one that runs right behind the high school to kind of circumvent back. And if anyone's walked on that, it is an interesting kind of
It's a bit rickety, isn't it?
I don't want to use rickety. I'm more thinking like abstract art, the way that it has like interesting angles and stuff. And so that wouldn't be that great. And then there's a couple things where, again, to get 5K, you would probably, there's a couple different routes that you could use through there as loops, but still even the biggest one that I've ever personally used, I think to get 5K is going to require you to do multiple laps, at least 3 of them, and that would involve crossing over or very near to the school fields where there can often be either cricket games or school events going on. And so I don't think we would want to have the interaction that close to like sporting events. And there's more than likely also, again, something that Park Run would pick up on, to make it a full loop. You kind of, if you're not cutting completely through the softball fields, you kind of would have to use a little bit of the road or parking lot. And so that wouldn't be sort of ideal. So that's why in our evaluation of them, they had several red dots and yellow dots and a couple green dots, and were not as ideal as the Stony Brook option. So I'll turn it back over to you, Lydia.
So were there any questions on the locations, on the location assessments? Any questions?
I just have one question, actually, that you had just said. Not wanting to run through the parking lot at the last location. Won't we be going through the parking lot at
Stony Brook?
Stony Brook?
Well, no, actually, because Matt, if you could go to slide 3, when that came up, our suggestion was at the turning point at the parking lot. Yeah,
I think it was down
slide.
3. That one,
Sorry.
That's it,
7.
that one there.
No.
So our suggestion here, again, following the cross-country trip, is actually to cut a gap, a 5 or a 6 foot gap in that telegraph pole at the turn, because I remember in the previous meeting, we talked about sometimes cars, that's the parking area that is the turning point up near, you know, when you enter through, Depot Road, the parking area there. So currently, the cross-country team actually cross the parking lot. And that, again, is a risk now, and it's a risk to our young people too. So my suggestion was to cut a gap there and run across the field so that runners are actually protected from any cars parking around there and any cars potentially turning while the event happens between 8 and 10 on
And-
Saturday morning.
One of the things that, in doing my research after our last meeting,
Yeah.
that field is overflow parking that is used for some of the events on certain weekends, like when the role play, that place is filled with cars on a Saturday. So, you know, I
Cutting the
understand,
gap wouldn't be,
Well,
yeah.
but I
Cutting the
also
gap.
went and looked,
Yeah.
and if we were going to do something, it's where the trail comes, where the wood road that comes into the parking area. If you're by those two telephone poles, you can actually go around the poles and skirt at the edge of the woods rather than going through the meadow.
Can you show us on the map? I don't know
Yeah,
where
could you
you're
show us?
Yeah,
Okay.
I'm,
So, yeah, so, no, so Matt, actually, okay, which button?
The red one.
The red one. Okay. So if you, where is it? Yeah, okay.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
right about here, there's a big telephone pole
right.
sticking up where the
Yes,
gate
with a
is.
chain. Yeah,
So
with
if
a
you-
chain
if you're-
on it.
I don't know what
Okay,
you're
so, okay, so look where the red thing is right now.
Yeah,
That's where the wood road comes in. There are two large.
Wood Road?
The girls'
road
camp.
The road coming down from the girls' camp.
Okay.
Yeah,
it's called the Wakey
There's a chain
Trail.
across the road.
and there's a chain across between the
Two
posts.
steel posts, yep.
Right, and, oops,
I don't know that.
it was me.
Oh,
I could change
You
slides
do
on you.
everything with that.
I didn't realize that they enabled that now.
Power, Margaret. You have the power.
So if you can go up, yeah, no, the other, yeah, so right in here is where the post is, so you can actually, if they did, with some brush clearing, you could come in and basically go along the edge of the woods
Exactly.
to get over to where the gate is. Actually, Matt, can you come down a little bit? So what you would basically do is kind of,
Like skirt the parking lot. And stay
yes,
along the-
tree
skirt
line.
stay
around
on the
there,
tree
and you
line.
Skirt the tree
basically
line,
come
yeah.
back to the roadway just before that big yellow metal gate that's across the roadway up to the Camp Neshoba, if you know where I'm talking.
What's the one that's gated off, that's not for public, like, it's not a public
The
road,
gate
right?
that we closed to keep people from driving up to
Yeah.
Camp Neshoba.
On a Saturday morning, there's gonna be a gate here
Mhm.
and a gate here, and they're both gonna be closed.
Yes,
Yes.
but,
But
Like-
there's a gap before you get to the post on the, you know where it says Marshall 2? There's actually a gap before you get to the post where that second gate is. And that's where the runners, exactly Margaret would run, skating the tree line
yeah,
and turn. So even if the parking was absolutely full, there wouldn't be any cross flow because people don't park on that physical field there.
yes, they do.
Do they? I've never seen
That
it.
when Camp Neshoba is rented on the weekends, I think at this point, there were 4, the role play ones.
Yeah, the live action
But
one.
how
Action
do they
role
get
play.
in? Because there's a telegraph pole all the way around.
I believe there's a way to get in
There's
there.
a gap on the far side by the, I'm concerned about touching the right
But it's
one.
not wide enough to bring a car in,
Yes,
Yeah.
is it?
They can access
because
it.
I've been there on Saturdays and I was kind of surprised to see there was dozens of vehicles parked in there. And for example, if somebody had rented Camp Neshoba for a wedding on the weekend or a family reunion, that field is where everybody would park.
Right.
Which again, though, with what you've explained, the ability to stay along that tree line, you're almost Not
As
quite
long
in
as
the
it's
parking
not
lot.
there.
As long as you're putting up cones and your
Yeah.
people
Yeah.
are staying there.
Yes.
That would be,
Yes.
Which is
Waiting.
very,
That keeps them out of the parking lot.
Yes.
You know. So I
Yeah.
was just saying, I knew we were in the parking lot before.
Mhm.
And, you know, hearing that being in a parking lot is a
is bad. And this
detriment.
is,
So, you know, I was like, okay, but if there's a way to get around that here, then it's not a detriment.
well, I
there's
think,
an alternative.
Yeah.
Yeah.
and again, also even comparing that sort of parking to what the WA one is, it's like paved parking lot, very active, like it's a road that you actually like are walking on behind the track field. It's a lot more active than.
It's a more
something-
active, what you're saying is it's a more active parking area than this where people would park and their car wouldn't move till they were ready to leave.
And.
Potentially at the end of the day or the end of the,
Yeah, and any kind of skirting at the WA one is non-existent. It's like
Yeah.
jostling when you do it. You kind of like stay to the left and you're in an active driveway, watch for cars pulling out, or stay to the right when a car is passing and watch for cars pulling out kind of thing. Whereas this, it sounds like very easily cone that off and have a little channel. So I think it's
And we could have
significantly better.
marshals.
Yeah,
We
you
could
can
have
even
marshals
because that's a
standing there,
smaller on
adults
either end.
standing
too.
there to make sure the runners are guided through, so they're not cutting across any vehicles parking or static cars.
And I do think it even is, I've never seen it at capacity, but I would imagine it is less active than that parking area, if you're at all familiar with that row of parking by the track. Like, it's just people coming in and out.
oh, you mean over at the Westford
At
County?
WA, like in
Okay.
comparing like that as
You
being.
say track, I was thinking train tracks.
Sorry, the.
Yeah, okay.
The field and the running track.
Okay,
Yeah, sorry for the confusion.
so where were we?
I think we were switching gears if no one had any
No,
other
I just had the
questions.
question about, you
Yeah.
know,
About,
Yeah,
trying to avoid the parking lot, and there seems to be a way.
yeah,
It's a good question.
especially since we're not trying to do this in the winter anymore.
Yeah. So that leads us actually to the second point, if there are no more questions are there any more questions from the public on the options? No. So the second point then is, are there the template letter of approval and then the insurance side? Was there anything from General Counsel, Matt, on the template letter?
No, again, in terms of what that would be, the conditions of approval that, the board, commission decides on, those were gonna be included. And again, also to the kind of, not to move ahead to insurance, but one of the things town council recommended was that the town be listed as a additional named insured on the certificate of insurance, similar to, licenses for other pieces of property. So that was really only their kind of the crux of town council's and the town manager's review was, again, outside of, the commission's specific conditions of approval for the.
So again, there, I think what we would do, if you chose to move forward, I would connect both insurance and both lawyers together to make sure that provision meets what Park Run is thinking and on the certificate of insurance, etc. I'm not a lawyer, so happy to introduce you there. And that whole process, so if we were to get approval from receiving the relevant documentation, takes about 6 weeks, just to set the context of how long it takes for Park Run to get through that process. So if there isn't anything on the template letter and the insurance, I can put the two lawyers together. The other final point was then, could you put up, Matt, the letter from Westford Land Preservation Foundation? And then we can just cover those points. So point number one, town council. I think we've talked about the town council review. We've just spoken about that. And then there's operating more than 5 months during the year. So again, bearing in mind, right now, it could take 6 weeks to get through the process. So if we were approved, we've probably only got 4 or 5 months left in this year. And again, you know, based on what we discussed previously, you might want to put some form of condition there in the letter about not operating in the winter. So there are opportunities within parkrun. Parkrun's a year-round thing, but certain events close based on the event and the conditions of the event in the winter. So they can close, you know, we may be able to right now we'd be lucky to get 5 months, but we may at least get 4 or 5 months worth of data in this year if the proposal goes through to approval. So, you know, we could live with that in this year, and that would give us enough data. Yeah.
Jim?
The trails get pretty bad in term from December through March.
Yeah,
And that was
exactly.
exactly what I sort of told her, was the
Exactly.
same thing with the blue.
Plus you got ice spikes on your shoes.
Absolutely.
And
So
you're
that might
walking
be
carefully. Yeah, that would not be a good time to do it.
absolutely. So that might be the time to close that down until the weather gets better again in the spring.
But also because I went and I guess it was middle of October, and one of the things that I noticed was in the fall, when the leaves are down and it's been rainy, is you've got some very slippery conditions, especially on parts of the trail where there's pavement, whatever is, you know, is some of it is, you know, thinking about, is there a set 5-month window where conditions are likely to be most favorable, Jim?
The August, September, October timeframe is when the cross-country teams will practice and have their meets. I think I saw one case where they actually had some kind of a championship competition in November. But effectively, they've said August, September, October. And I know they don't run on Saturday, or at least I don't think they run on Saturday morning like you guys are planning.
Not officially.
Right, but they do run during the week. I don't know how many days out of the week, but that makes that kind of a busy time.
Mm-hmm.
The months that look the clearest and the safest are like April, May, June, July. That's what I see. You don't have the cross-country runners. You don't have any ice. There's a limited amount of leaves covering up tripping hazards, things like that.
Mm-hmm.
So, and there's the camp operations, which are like June, July, August, but that's Monday through Friday. And it's not on the same trails. It's not in the same area.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not like it takes over the route.
So those were 4 months you just listed?
Yeah, that's how much the gap is from April, May, June, July. Prior to that, it's icy. After that, it's cross-country practice.
As you said, Jim, cross-country is not on a Saturday.
Right.
We're anticipating and hoping to get some cross-country volunteers involved in parkrun. And as you said, they train during the week, but that Saturday.
They train and they have
Saturday.
competitions during the week.
And they have competitions, exactly. So 8 till 10, I think we're okay there. And just a point, you know, we understand it's a trail and we understand we've done the full risk assessment. There has to be still provision and weather-dependent provision. If there is an event, you know, like heavy rain and it's very muddy, for example, and we think as race directors that causes too much of a hazard, we can always cancel based on weather-based issues during the year. So there's always that. I wouldn't want you to think that, yeah, we'll do it in any...
You're not going to be out there during a hurricane.
No, we're not. So there is that provision. You'd get a microsite. We would get a site saying, you know, this is Stony Brook Park Run, and we as race directors will review and post on the site if weather conditions mean it's not a good idea to meet, and we would cancel then.
So a question of mine would be, okay, so we do an assessment of the trails, and, you know, they're of a certain condition now, but, you know, let's say that not only park run, but, you know, wear and tear on the trails, you know, maybe if they're different or they degrade, you know, who's responsible for maintaining the trails to the standard that Park Run has agreed they need to be to have an effective program?
Well, and, you know, I think that had come up at the last meeting, but also when we were at annual town meeting in the spring, and there was a big discussion about natural fields versus turf fields, and the point was made that natural fields, natural surfaces, they needed periods of rest. They couldn't necessarily be used as extensively during the year. And that made me realize that one thing that's never been talked about as we have increased use of the trails at East Boston camps is do we need to be mindful that at times, the uses of trails need to be rested, is that these are natural.
Yeah, there is going to need to be perhaps maintenance of the trail.
Or that,
Or just the resting period.
or that a natural surface cannot necessarily take an infinite amount of use. And that was something that had never occurred to me. But yeah, so these are questions that I think we have coming into this. And it certainly becomes, if some other organization, if West Neshoba Valley Tech High School, which I understand also comes here and trains, if other groups start, like you have, trying to make a formal arrangement, we now start to kind of realize we're managing more than we thought we were.
Or responsible to manage those trails. I mean, right now, we don't manage
No.
those trails.
The letter here didn't say why they want to limit it to no more than 5 months, but I'm assuming it's just for generalized wear and tear issues on the trails.
And it,
Use where, the public is running into more crowds, running on Saturday mornings, those kind of things. That's my guess.
well, and I think members of the foundation were here for that dedicated off-cycle meeting, so I think they also heard our conversations where we were starting to talk about limiting the number of months during the year that this would happen. So
This is their restriction.
Right,
and they
but
didn't
I think-
explain why, they just said this is.
yeah, but
this is it.
I think this was they liked what they followed our arguments, and so they were basically potentially, being very specific with their agreement.
They were agreeing to it with contingencies, and, they've pointed them out.
Yep,
Yeah, and we can review after too,
yes.
and adjust it accordingly.
And I think that leads into very well, like one of their other ones, number 4, that we would do, like you guys talked about before, and that's why we'd hope that we can get a motion for a vote pretty soon, so that maybe we can get started and get a few months in to see, again, how this works this year and how we can.
You mean
do
almost like a
better.
pilot?
Yeah,
Yeah,
a pilot, like,
exactly.
and that's, again, why I feel like with following the 5 months, I personally think that if there's a little bit of overlap with the cross-country season, that would allow you to see, is that a viable thing, that we're there on Saturday when they're during the week? Clearly, the trails are safe for usage kind of thing. And in that first year, where it would only be a couple months, you'd be able to very quickly see, like, nope, this is going to be too much. If we reevaluate for next year, we definitely want to cut off the fall, or whether you can go into an October kind of November thing, which I think from everything that I've seen with other running groups that I work with my thing, I mean, a true season from like May to October kind of thing with the winter cut off. So I'd like to see a little bit of crossover with that fall.
That'd be 6 months, and you got 5 as your max.
Okay.
But even from now, bearing in mind we have only 6 weeks, if you consider there was a view now to move, we'd still only have about, get roughly 4 to 5 months of data in this pilot this year. Just as a point on maintenance too, it's a community event. So we're aiming to engage the community, not just in running and walking around the area. We would also promote the ability to volunteer with the Westford Conservation Trust. So if there was maintenance opportunities for the trail,
And so
we could promote that as part of the run.
this is where it gets into the
It's
conservation
tricky.
restriction. We had a walk with the conservation restriction grantee is looking to change. We've had some preliminary conversations with representatives of the organization that we believe will be picking up the conservation restriction. And one of the topics that came up is, because they've got extensive experience, is how do you rehabilitate, how do you maintain these trails? And this is not, I believe this is something where this is not many hands, this is a case where we would want experienced people in terms of knowing what they're doing, the right approach, the right materials. So yes, it's nice to say, oh, we've got volunteers, and the volunteers can be great coming in and moving trees off. But if you're doing something very specific, like rehabilitating a trail, that's
different.
That's different.
Yeah.
And maybe it means a meeting with the other group as well.
Yeah, and so a lot of,
And seeing what would work for them.
well, what I got out of the conversation was, because of the number of properties they already oversee, they have some experience that potentially we could tap into. People who have already, places that have been where we are now, that we can take some lessons learned, get some approaches for dealing with stuff.
And who's the other group, Margaret?
I don't know that it's official yet.
Yeah, I'd prefer to stay mum on it, just in the event something doesn't go through and
Yeah.
it's been
So
a lot of information.
yeah.
That's an option, effectively, that could be a future option in terms of trail maintenance.
Well, that's a conversation that we will probably be having in the future with whoever takes over the CR. But that's a long way down the road. But it's one of those cases that I think it's not a simple thing to do. It's going to be more complex than moving branches off of trails. So we'll cross that bridge when we get to it.
I think coming back to Andrea's letter, a point there is that, we would come back to you, and not just come back to you in a year, but we'd continue to work with the commission to see how it's going, to check in, to look at the numbers. We would look at, the number of people on the trail. We would look at the events and review on a weekly basis, but could come back at a cadence that makes sense for the commission to see how it's going, to talk about attendance, talk about maintenance.
It's a work in
So
progress as well.
it's a work in progress, exactly. We're just looking to get some data for you to assess, is this something that's viable?
Yeah, so that's why we're hoping, I think that you used the perfect terms for what we're hoping for tonight, is a motion for a vote for this year to basically do like a pilot kind of thing.
We've kind of talked around item 3.
Actually, we didn't. I skipped over that. I was responsible for that one.
Well,
That it's an easy one,
Yeah,
that it's a no. Like there's no sort of after parties or.
It's easier to have a no.
Well, but
Yeah.
that's the thing, is part of what was in the original presentation was meet someplace afterwards, and socialize.
So ultimately, the run, but remembering if you look at the route, the run starts at it starts at the track in Stony Brook Middle School, and it finishes at Stony Brook Middle School. And then, as we mentioned at the beginning, if people wanted to go to Muffins on Main, or if people wanted to go to that nice shop at the end of Depot, then that's great. But if there was going to be a concentration of people finishing the run, it would be at the track. They wouldn't then go back on the trail and walk to the camp because that's not how it's structured. So if people were going to meet socially, it would be at the end. And yes, if people wanted to drive away and go to Muffins on
That
Main.
might be something we want to talk to the schools
Well-
and ask if they want.
Well, yeah.
activities at the
Well,
track.
right, I mean, again, it's, I don't,
Something like that, just like we don't want to have it at the beaches and the campsites.
But part of this, and me speaking personally now, part of this is the Land Preservation Foundation has basically put on us no after parties at the camp. That place, if it's not rented, well, the Camp Wacky is never rented. Camp Neshoba occasionally is on the weekend, but basically those are open to the public. Do we even have a way of enforcing no public gatherings there?
no, I mean, if in the event, you're saying if a group of people,
If people of their own volition decide, hey, we've all done this great run, I've got this stuff in my car, you've got that stuff, let's just go all here and have a cookout and just enjoy it the way, what concerns me is,
No grilling, no beer, no alcohol. no
Right, and
fire,
we-
those all- those all-
So the runners
already-
get that as a piece of information.
So, yeah,
They
exactly,
get it as
that's a
piece
great
of
point.
information.
but,
That's a great
Maybe they
point.
need to sign something.
Yeah, so there's, okay.
yeah,
That would commit them to
You're right,
understanding that.
that part of that is when signing up for Stony Brook,
Right,
that's one of the conditions they agreed to abide to,
and sign.
is that they will not, is yes, they're welcome to come back and walk through, but no, they are not welcome to come back and have an informal get-together.
We wish they could, but they can't.
Yeah, and that's something, again, at the start of every event, we would go through a series of safety steps.
And they can
we would go
also
through
sign
that.
paper that they've read it, so that commits them.
Yeah, it just,
So it's not like they never knew about it.
yeah, it just, because the responsibility, if people behave badly, we're the ones who end up
Getting called out for.
getting called
Yeah.
out, and yes, and it's, but Jim, you look like you're bad, nope, okay,
Okay, I think we covered all that.
okay, so was there anything else that we needed to cover?
When?
In, what?
But when, what period of time?
Well, I was thinking more in terms of you had taken actions to go off and then, questions that had come up. It's been a couple of months and I was just opening it up if commissioners had other questions, had other thoughts that they wanted to share, now would be the time to do it. And then we get into the discussion of, a proposed time frame or laying out a proposal for what would be the basis of a motion to allow it.
I'm ready for that.
So Jim, were you thinking about,
I'm solid good with April, May, June, July. August, I could do a sharing, because I suspect the beginning of August, the cross-country teams aren't starting on August 1. School doesn't start until either the last week of August or first week of September. And they may practice a week or two before. So I think you could probably split August in half, and that would be a 4.5-month period.
so, and that is talking about, so that would be what it would look like in 2026? Because we've got a whole year to,
Because you have to play it out.
2025, why not?
because April's passed.
April is, but
April
July
and
and
May.
August aren't gone yet.
Okay, but we're also looking at,
We're looking
once
at
you get the
ramp up.
approval, you've
6-week ramp up, exactly.
they've got a 6-week,
It's a
okay.
6-week ramp
Just
up.
because, weather's not going to change. December, January, February, March, those are out. I don't want to put them all on there the same, all week long. The kids are going to be doing the cross-country, and then on Saturday morning, that's taken up too. I don't want to do that.
And this is supposed to be a pilot, so we don't have to guarantee them 5 months right now. We're supposed to be doing a pilot to check and make sure that things are going to kind of.
See if all the mechanics work.
We
the
all
way-
And then
think
you
they're
tweak
going
it,
to,
and then you tweak
and
it.
then we can, potentially ramp it up. But yeah,
So are you
Jim is
thinking-
saying, I wasn't anticipating them getting 5 months out of
So if we've got
2025.
if we've got 3 weeks left in July and 3 weeks through August, that would be your 6 weeks. So you would not be able to start a pilot until the last week in August.
We could start 6 weeks from today, if you wanted.
If we could get a little bit more flexibility with this pilot though, like that we get then like August,
More
September,
flexibility this
October to
year.
get like 3
Yeah.
months this year to see something and then shift it to what is more amenable to you guys.
But then you
I
would
think otherwise,
actually-
just getting 1 or 2 months as a pilot is
not enough.
not great
Because then
data
you would
this year.
see the trail, so when we talk about trail maintenance, you would see how do we operate in the summer? How do we make sure people are well behaved, which is often the summer months when people want to do cookouts and things like that.
How many months?
How do we operate with Westford, cross-country, etc.? You see all of those different levers we could give you data on if we got a bit longer this year.
So could we give them 4 months the first year? Does that work out?
And this is me just thinking for myself, I think one of the advantages, if we start with a shorter pilot this year, is it probably won't have the advertising, the word of mouth. They'll probably be starting off with a smaller group of
There were
participants.
limitations in your presentation. I don't know about this one, but in past presentations, you had first year limits, was it 40 people? And then you expected 80 or 100 after that?
It takes a while to build up. This was based on Cutler Park. I mean, they said it also varies seasonally. You get a few more people in the summer and then it tapers off in the winter.
So they had proposed some numbers.
So we proposed numbers, but having the data to back that up in these nice end of summer months into the fall, I think would be a suggestion.
And what I remember from the last meeting is this 40 people would be allowed to register as participants for parkland at Stony Brook Conservation Area. They're not registering every week. They register once, and then they can attend that event anytime it's held.
Correct.
And in fact, if they show up and nobody's there, they can still do the route, but they're not getting credit for
And
participating.
we would measure every week how many people attend, because you put the results up online, everybody can see that. So you
But-
get
but
data
there's-
every week.
It's limiting how many people have said they're interested in running the course, but it's not,
I
it's,
don't care how many people register, how many people
Yeah.
are interested. I want to know how many people are running.
and they would,
They-
and that's
they
what you'd
track it.
be able to track with your metrics.
Exactly.
No,
Exactly.
she said that they were going to, I think in your presentation, you said you'd have a cap the first year of like 40 people in the run, and then in subsequent years, you'd expect to ramp up to 80 or 100.
Well,
That was the wish.
this is the wish,
Right.
but we
Yeah.
don't have data to provide that, and that's why our suggestion would be to extend a couple more months this year to provide you the data to see if, in practice, like you said, there's a number of people interested, but how many people came? We could provide you that on a weekly basis.
Because in seeing, I don't know if this is what you were alluding to, like if you only did a pilot that's like 2 months, like
Yeah,
first
some
month is
could
getting
do that.
word out, like it's not gonna be realistic. Second, like, so really trying ideally to get like 3-4 months under your belt to see what is this gonna.
But you've got 6 weeks to get the word out. This is open to the public. People yes, you're wanting people to register so you can track them. But realistically, anybody who's heard that you're going to do this can show up and start doing the route on their own before you have your initial event, because it's open to the public. So it's just, your tracking will start on your first day, but that's not to say that your participation will start on the first day. People can show up and do the route on their own.
Yeah, but then they wouldn't be a part of park run.
Right,
We can't
but
control
you know,
Well, you were the catalyst to bring those folks there.
well, yes and no.
Yeah.
Some yes and some no.
Yeah, but just remember, part of this park run, part of the park run ethos is around consistency and repetition, and the more park runs you come to in community, the more you get these T-shirts which say, hey, I've been and attended 10 or 20 or 30. So that's the draw to bring people. So I hear what you're saying, Margaret. Tomorrow I could go to Muffins on Main and say I had a wonderful walk in Stony Brook, and say that to 8 or 10 people outside of parkrun. That's something that we can't control. But the goal for consistency for parkrun is this whole coming back week after week, running in community, being rewarded and have positive reinforcement around that. So yes, you could do that on your own, but this is about doing something, running and walking in community.
We have to do it to know.
Well, yeah, and I think
Yeah.
one of the things I like about doing a shorter one in the fall is that lets us test out all of the protocols and stuff that we've put in place with a smaller crowd. And then if things are looking good, then we come back and we, starting with a full season in April, which is when you're probably getting people thinking
Absolutely.
to train. And I don't
So you
know,
have you
Jim,
have-
if you've
No,
you've
just
got
saying.
different ideas, or Marilyn?
No, I just wanted to see if I understood you correctly.
April to July is a sure thing for me. I'm okay with that.
Say
In
again?
August, I could split.
But in terms of this fall, would you be,
August.
okay, so basically what you're saying is For 2025,
I don't want to overlap them fully with the cross-country time,
regardless of how many people they bring in.
Right.
Okay.
because it's going to start out with up to 40.
For how
That's
long
what
a window?
that's what the past presentations had, is expectation of 40 people at the beginning, ramping up to 80 or 100 by the second year.
But it doesn't limit them at 40. It's an expectation that that's what's going
I-
to show
I
up.
think it
But
did.
it's not a max that
I
can,
thought it did have a limit. I thought that was-
It's how
it?
many people can register.
Did your presentations earlier,
So we put estimates in there, but Margaret described it perfectly. When you register for parkrun, you register, so you have that parkrun pass. Basically, you register once, and then when you choose to attend, we'll only know when you attend, because then when you finish, your barcode is registered that you attended that run, and that counts as one run, then that counts towards your T-shirt.
So if you say you're a participant, you've already registered, you're a participant at Cutler Park,
Yeah.
and then you move to Chelmsford, and you decide, oh, I'm going to run Stony Brook Conservation Area, do you have to re-register?
No.
So in fact, you have no way of limiting how many, the 40 is an estimate, there is no way to limit how
It's
many
an
people.
estimate, yeah, and it's an estimate based on.
Yeah,
So remember in an earlier meeting, you asked,
all the more reason I don't want to overlap then with the other uses of the camp.
We need it.
but
so what's your
Jim-
time frame, Jim?
I got April, May, June, July, and I'm willing to go part of August, most of August.
so not starting,
But then, Jim, we only have 2 weeks. That would only give us roughly 2 weeks worth of data. Wouldn't
actually,
an
no, it
option?
would,
What do you
it,
mean? Wait a minute.
the
You're
first 2
saying
weeks
that
in
this
August,
is
it wouldn't,
longer,
because
right?
that's still part of the 6 weeks
Yeah.
this year.
Time flies.
So here we are. Yeah. So the first 2 weeks in August, exactly. So we'd only have the last 2 weeks in August. So we'd run
Like if
two
we don't go into
data
the fall,
points.
it's not,
Do-
you're not
Okay.
getting a pilot.
Do other commissioners,
Makes sense
how
to
do,
me.
how do other commissioners feel about, we know how Jim feels about the pilot. How do other commissioners feel about the pilot, going through October?
I have no trouble giving them 3 months, just, to see how that works.
I'm more cautious like Jim. I'm thinking we might be able to slip out into September, but I hear what Jim says, and again,
Okay,
You know,
so,
if
I
it's
mean,
a
the
pilot,
beginning
we
of
start
October,
off
the beginning of
slow.
October,
yeah, but
Is- Is that amenable to the,
Yeah, something like that, I could see.
So
going
how much time are we giving them?
September.
so August and September this year? As a pilot,
2 months.
and then come back before the commission,
For the fall?
It's not even 2 months then,
So
if
that's
it's
eight.
half of August, like we can't get half
So
of
that's 6.
October.
No, and it's, to
Explain it better.
Okay,
permit, allow, as one of the conditions of approval, allow it to occur in August and September of this year, and then have them come back, sometime in November, December, to discuss, the results, how things went, and then and then in 2026, holding
well, in
true to.
2025, we'll plan for 2026 based on what they
At
tell
the
us.
end of 20.
Yeah.
Right, so,
Exactly.
yeah, so, and it,
I mean, I still think that going into October
Yeah.
would give you more data for us to then, you're talking about like 4 more weeks kind of thing, we're already talking about the fall. But like, again, we said our 6 weeks is not gonna be able to start until almost the end of August. So trying to get like 2 full months then, which would be 8 weeks, would put you into like mid-October, end of October. I mean, we're splitting hairs on it. I don't think it's unreasonable when we know that that's it then. And then we come back in November and we say, I know, hoping a little flexibility, like on maybe just one person's voting kind of thing, but to get you, here's 8 data points kind of thing.
But-
Particularly when I've seen that the ramp up of these, even when you advertise,
so,
like it takes
so what,
several.
and this circles back to, so what data points are you going to bring us at the end of the pilot?
So if you gave us 12 weeks, if you gave us August, September, October, we could show you pictures of the trail to see what the state of the trail is. We could give you numbers of people who had actually attended every week, so we would have 12 weeks worth of data. We could give you demographics by age, by sex. We could also monitor any kind of incidents. You know, we could monitor compliance to after parties or not behaviour
We could
on the
even
trails.
reach out to, did you say you have connections with cross country to see if
Yeah.
they felt like that
We
this
could get feedback from the
interfered with
stakeholders.
them? And we can always leave the same sort of weather caveat of like, if something's not working, this is a pilot one, we can say, nope, like this is too much. Cross country isn't getting along with it. And we say we end the pilot early. But having that flexibility to bring you those data points, I think in particular what will be useful is seeing if we hit that plateau that I am expecting in having done similar things. Even if we start advertising right now, it's not until it's done several times that word of mouth and it happens. And so I think if you could see, hey, look, this is where it sort of plateaued at like 40 people kind of thing, and then it was steady until we ended it in October. Go ahead, Jim.
Jim?
My concern isn't conflict with the cross-country. It's the load that prevents the public from using the property.
Okay.
Because if cross-country's going to use it Monday through Friday, and then you guys got Saturday morning, that's 1.5 days left.
I mean, for me, it's more like that's optimal then. Like we're talking about this being like 4 weeks kind of thing. Stress test it at its most severe so that we can come back to you and say,
I don't want to
there
stress.
was.
I don't want to
No, I
stress
don't
it.
want to stress.
Like in doing a pilot or experiment, like you don't want to be like, well, let's see how if we do it just for 3 weeks, like maybe no one will show up, and then we can come back to you and say, hey, only 10 people come. Why don't we do this like for 10 months kind of thing? It's not going to interfere. I think you want to see how it interacts with the other people, with the public,
Absolutely.
with the cross country, and with the participants kind of thing.
But the things that I was most interested in hearing at the end of the pilot is, how are things working with monitoring the hazards? How are things working with people who can actually do the full route? People who are not
Okay.
already runners and they
Yeah.
hit those hills, how is that going to work?
Yeah.
How is compliance going through that grassy area? There are a lot of things that we've talked about here, which we've said, alternatives that we've said we've come up with to get around some of the challenges is how are all of those alternatives actually working? So those are things that you're not able to give us, barcoding on.
No.
That's just
So
gonna.
give us a list. I would so here we go. If you give us 3 months, give us a list of what you want feedback on at the end of those 3 months. Some of those figures we'll get through Parkrun and the website, and others we will, find a way to report back on, whether it's surveys. I know there's an opportunity to feedback as a runner. You can talk about how many are completed and stuff like that, but things like interactions with other members of the community that are using the trail and stuff like that, come to us with the list that you want. I'll see what we can do within Parkrun, and the others outside of that, we'll see if we can monitor them adjacent and report back 3 months later with 12 data points we'll have then, 12 weeks.
And again, more hope for overlap with like seeing when is that parking used? Because if we make it a small data point and then we luck out and there's no one in the parking, you're never going to know how that worked. I think
Labor Day weekend.
Well, exactly. So if we've got data points that cover all of those supposedly high peak or certain events, bad weather, cross country.
Eric?
No, I was going to say, I'm not inclined to agree past the end of September. I don't know if we need 12 data points, 12 runs, 3 months worth to get an idea. I think we're going to get an idea. So while I'm very much cautious like Jim, I'm willing to slide it into September, to the end of September. But, and then we can. go
Not
back
even
and-
the first, not even like a week or two in October to balance what's.
It's definitely over Labor Day. I mean, definitely over the.
So, okay, I'm.
I'm listening to what Jim's saying, and I hear what he's saying, and I'm listening
How many weeks is that?
to the applicant and what they're trying to achieve, and I'm saying, okay, maybe we don't go through, October, but, give them till the end of September, and that gives them like 10 weeks.
Well, no, because they
Or if
can't,
start, they'll
they
give them
can't-
8 weeks at least.
they can't start till the last, because they've got 3 weeks in July, the
But
first.
they have all of August and all of September.
No, they
But
don't,
it's-
because they've got a
6 weeks.
6-week window
Once you
of
approve
their
it.
intake process, essentially.
I'm not inclined to let them go past September.
Okay,
I don't, their process to get up and running is that. But as Jim says, I get that, and, you know, that's where I'm at, and that's what Matt was wondering. He was looking
Okay.
for,
So
you
Eric,
know, what the commission thought, you know, beyond Jim's, you know, window. So I'm saying, you know, probably give another 4 weeks beyond Jim's window, but that puts us at the end of September.
what's your concern after September?
What was that?
What's your concern after September if it went 2 weeks into
You know, it
October?
really, you know, weather dependent, but like Jim says, he doesn't wanna, I don't wanna stress the trails out, and I think if we have a shorter period of time, and this is a pilot, I still think we'll get the information necessary to see if this is gonna be viable going forward.
5, 6, so it would be
So how many weeks will they have
Two.
altogether?
2 in August, 4 in September.
I think they get at least, I think they get at least
So,
6
so
months.
looking at a calendar, you know, pending the, you know, if the commission approved it today, the start of that 6-week process, there'd be 6 weeks from,
6
6
Saturdays.
Saturdays, the end of August, 2 in August, 4 in September, you know, to Eric's point.
And when could they, suppose that it succeeds, when would they start it up again?
In
I mean, that's-
2026?
End of the year when we do a review, we
Yeah.
set those dates, but it might.
probably,
Maybe
it would
July.
probably be starting in April, next April.
So we'd have a trial period, August, September, something like that.
That gives us 6
October.
I mean, even if we granted them permission tonight to do it, I still think there's stuff we have to hammer out and meet with them before they actually, I mean, tonight couldn't be our last meeting.
No, no.
Even if we gave them
of course not, Eric.
authorization to do it, I still think there's stuff that we need to discuss, although they know that they're gonna be able to move forward and do something.
So while that 6 weeks process is going on, you're gonna come up with a list of all the metrics you could give us at the end of the pilot, and
We should let our.
and we should be
Yeah.
coming up with our own list
Right.
of,
But I don't wanna continue to push this out and not give them some time to do something. We
yes.
can say, hey, we're gonna let you do something, but we still gotta work on these things before, you know, you start running.
Can I just ask, I mean, I think it's pretty clear that Jim and Eric are like, 6 weeks is plenty, like, is there any consensus from the other board members, whether like 8 makes a little bit more sense? I
Yeah,
mean, even if this is not a unanimous vote, if it's
What do you think, Anne? What do you think, Marilyn?
like,
Well,
to get halfway through October
Do-
and have 8.
Do we want to start this with a motion? Well,
I'd
Well,
like
I
to
mean,
get a
the
sense from
motion to
every,
mid-October,
I'd like to get
if
a
you
sense
want to
from every
vote that,
member.
we'd be interested to hear if that passes.
Like,
Mid-October,
that's the board's
Yeah.
prerogative
Yeah.
Like
to
if
make
So-
a motion.
so it's
Margaret
just-
wanted to make a motion
So what do you
through
think, Anne?
October.
Could we just get everybody's
Enough.
viewpoint?
I mean, through the chair, if, you know, you want to ask
So-
people's positions, if not, you know, it's been an hour, you know, we
Yeah,
do have other
we
things
have
on there,
other
so,
things.
I
Okay.
mean, you know, let's,
so,
I'll tell you what,
am,
I'll make a motion. I'll
Okay.
throw it out. I'll make a motion that we allow them to start, or that we allow them to move forward, but, you know, at the end of September, that will cut it off, and then they'll come back to us maybe in November, and we'll discuss about 2026.
So you're saying August, September of this year.
Yeah.
so is the last.
I'd second that.
First, okay, just, October. So October 2nd is a Saturday.
no, oh, sorry, yes.
Would,
October 4th is a Saturday.
Yes, I'm amenable to, so.
to the
through
first,
October 2nd.
yeah. And I'm amenable to that. Marilyn, would you go beyond October 2nd?
I would have given them, that gives us how many weeks?
That gives them 7 Saturdays.
I'll go with that. That's a compromise.
That's good.
Okay.
Yeah, the 4th is the.
October 4th?
Yeah, I think we were looking at September.
I'm sorry.
Or whatever, October 4th.
Okay.
So I'll make the motion that they can do the park runs through October 4th.
Okay. So the first
Jim, would
Saturday.
you second that?
And subject to the conditions.
Subject to the contingencies of the Westford Land Preservation Foundation.
Okay.
Yep, I seconded it.
All those in favor? Aye. So we will,
But yeah, when will we meet again to hammer out some of what we want them to monitor and track? So
And
when
for them
we
to
meet
come up
in
with a-
November, you know, we'll be able to look at the data that was collected.
So the commission's next meeting are the 23rd of July. Yeah, that's still this month. August 13th and August 27th.
I don't know
We
what
have to
the,
give
you know.
them-
Right, I mean, so we can certainly
Yeah,
figure.
we can give them times and, you know.
Right, you know,
yeah, because July 23rd, we also have our applicant interviews.
yeah,
and-
that's becoming a heavy meeting in and of itself, so.
Okay, so likely it'll be August 13th,
August 13th.
because we have applicant interviews at the next meeting.
Okay.
And at that time, you know, if commissioners have ideas for metrics, things, you know, deliverable, you know, quote unquote deliverables from the pilot, you know, please send them to me. We can include
Yep.
them in the packet. Same thing with if you got, you know, we can put them in writing and go from there.
But
So it's-
this allows us to start our
Yes.
initiation
Yeah.
process.
Yes.
So
Okay.
could,
You can get the word out now.
yeah, so can I make a request to the Commission to provide us a letter of approval so I can start to initiate with Park Run the
Yes,
insurance and all
and
that
I'll-
kind of stuff?
Yeah, we just voted on it, so you can put something,
And-
you know, and,
Can
Certainly.
I have a motion that the chair signs the letter?
yeah, the chair can sign the letter.
Second?
Sounds good.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Okay.
Okay.
So we're
Thank
gonna
you.
let you go.
Yes.
Thank you.
And we're gonna meet on the 13th and, you know,
13th.
thank you very much.
Thank you, guys.
Okay,
Good luck with it all.
Thank you.
Successful.
yep. And I apologize to members of the audience and people who are here for subsequent public hearings that this has gone on longer than we thought. Moving on to our 7:25 PM agenda item.
Thank you.
It's special condition number 53, a request to use dye-quat by the Friends of Forge Pond. Hello, Dave.
Hi. I'm Dave Barr. I'm a member of the Westford Health Lakes Ponds Collaborative, Littleton Clean Lakes Committee, and Friends of Forge Pond. We talked earlier about herbicide treatments when we came to get approval to be able to do them. And at that time, we weren't expecting to do treatments in Westford this summer. But Friends of Forge Pond has thought more about it, and we think it is worthwhile to do some kind of treatment. Our objectives are to both see how contact herbicides, systemic herbicides perform on the lake in terms of dealing with our invasive plants, see how these treatments affect our eco-harvesting treatments next fall, or next summer, and both kinds of herbicides, and also give some relief from the invasive plants. There's, again, very heavy level of plants in the lake this year, to give some level of relief to the people using the lakes. So I'm coming back. One of the special conditions was that if we felt like it was appropriate to use dicot, we would come back and seek approval to do that, and explain why we're asking for it, and what the other options would be, and why we don't feel like those are adequate. So we've worked with the vendor Solitude, which is the vendor that pretty much does all of the herbicide treatments in the area. Littleton did a request for proposals for herbicide treatments in Littleton, and the only applicant was Solitude. And we also reached out to the Massachusetts Department of Recreation and Conservation for their guidance. They do a lot of plant management in the lakes that they manage, including a lot of, and they're significant proponents for herbicides, so they have a lot of experience with that. So we reached out to them also for their recommendations for what we do. Provided, thanks to Westford Health Lakes and Ponds Collaborative, Matt arranged to have early plant surveys on, normally we request Forge Pond to be done later in the season, but Matt arranged for them to be done in the middle of June when the other lakes in town were being done. You can see these are the results from June 19th, I think. We sent these survey results to Solitude and to DCR and asked them what their recommendations were for doing the treatments. By far the biggest plant species are Eurasian milfoil and variable milfoil. We have 58 acres of Eurasian milfoil, 28 acres of variable leaf milfoil. We have 14 acres of fanwort, which we could also possibly do, but I don't think we have the budget for it. DCR recommended that we, address right now address the milfoils, and then when those have had some effect, then look at doing the fanwort. I don't know that we would be doing this. We're not planning to do a multi-year.
Okay, so I guess there's what you want to do this year, and then there are scenarios of what you might do in subsequent years. I think at this point, for this discussion, I would want to keep it focused to just what's in front of us for this year.
Yeah, okay. So the recommendation, Solitude recommended using diquat as a contact herbicide, and there's a
Fluoroperoxyfen benzyl.
yes, thank you, but I'm going to call it Prosolacor because it's easier to communicate, as a systemic herbicide. They indicated that for milfoils, there's really no other cost-effective contact herbicide. He said if we can't use diquat, he would recommend spot treating with Prosolacor, or the other possibility would be to use a whole lake treatment with fluoridone, which is another systemic. Using just, so those are more expensive. The quote that they gave us for doing a whole lake treatment with fluoridone was $150,000. Our budget is like $12,000. And in addition, fluoridone is really only effective April through June, so it's too late to do that this year. So if we weren't, in Solitude's opinion, if we weren't able to use diquat, we would be spot treating with Priscillacor, but that's a lot more expensive, and we can get to how much we can do, and we wouldn't have any relief this year to lake users because the systemic treatments don't really have an effect immediately. It's over months that it begins to take an effect.
Okay, Jim?
Besides the concerns we had that are documented in the orders of conditions for dicot, dicot doesn't kill the roots of the milfoil. And so that allows for a relatively fast regrowth of whatever you're going after. It's moderately good at killing Eurasian milfoil, but again, it doesn't kill the roots. And it comes with use restrictions because it's not the most environmentally friendly herbicide. And some of the areas from the diagrams you gave us show the plant growth is strong over near the beaches, near our recreation areas. And that would mean it's 1 to 5 days of
So just because I have specific experience with this, the dicot does not have any use restriction on the day of treatment. It is typically implemented by the applicator as an additional measure of precaution. Its use restrictions for drinking water, for irrigating, or for providing water for livestock. Again, it isn't.
right.
It is a herbicide.
That's not a case that
Right.
applies.
So but that's where that 5-day comes in. The contact. You're expressing a concern about a contact herb
The gold
about.
standard of the herbicides that I read about was the Priscillacor.
Mhm.
That one is more expensive than the dicot. Dicot, I think, is the cheapest one. But Priscillacor, you may not even need a regrowth, retreatment for a year or 2 years. Whereas the dicot, you might need to do a couple of times per year to keep the milfoil under control. Priscillacor kills the roots of the plant, of the milfoil.
Right.
Root selectivity, it is a little more expensive, like the dicot might be $400 to $1,200 an acre, whereas Priscillacor might be $1,200 to $1,500 per acre, something like that, in that ballpark. So the Priscillacor is the alternative that I would want to see if you're not going to use the dicot.
So Jim,
We don't want to use the dicot.
would it give them relief this year?
What would-
Like, one of the reasons they wanted to use the dicot, it seems like they would get relief this year from
Short term.
short-term this year,
Yeah.
as opposed to using another chemical for treatment that they might not get the relief this year. They wouldn't see it till next year.
Or
No,
with Priscillacor?
Priscillacor would give you relief for this year and it'll extend
Oh.
because it kills off the roots.
So the fact that these behave differently is why we want to try both of them to see what the effect is.
This shouldn't be an experiment. I mean, the information in from
So
these charts here indicate which ones have good control or medium control ability. I don't think we're doing this as an experiment to see how it works.
So what I was going to say was we want to see what effect it has on our eco harvesting for next year, what kind of carryover there is. The new Massachusetts guidance for lake management indicates that even though dicot is a contact herbicide, which, as you say, it only affects, the definition of a contact herbicide is that it only affects the part of the plant that it touches. And systemic herbicides get absorbed into the plants and go through the plants, and so they will also affect the roots. We're interested in seeing, so the new Mass GLM says that even though dicot is a contact herbicide, it has they're found in a number of Massachusetts lakes that it has systemic properties that it can carry over from one year to the next. And so we're interested in seeing on the eco harvesting for next year, how do these affect the eco harvesting? We're thinking that we might be able to have a more productive, more effective eco harvesting next year by using some herbicides the year before, because echo harvesting is a lot more expensive than
So you gotta,
these.
you have like a control area where you're gonna do the, you wanna do treatment and then echo harvesting next year and see how much you harvest. And another area where you don't do treatment and do echo harvesting next year, so you can do it, that's how you do an experiment to determine the effectiveness. Is that what your plan is?
Yeah.
How could we tell that from any of this stuff? The maps just showed Westford and Littleton, which we're not treating Littleton. You might be, but the maps for this restriction only really apply for Westford. So
So,
where is this experiment taking place?
so are you,
So we have some areas where we'd be treating with dicot, some areas where we would be treating with
I couldn't
Priscillicor.
I couldn't determine that from looking at this.
Well, so, okay, I said the comparisons show doing so many acres of dicot, so many acres of Priscillicor, and.
have you figured out on the maps that Matt showed that identified the areas with the highest concentration of plants, has the vendor, is it the vendor who is going to basically say based on our experience, here dicot, here Priscillicor, and maybe here, well, no. But yeah, has it been thought out yet in terms of which areas would be targeted for which chemicals?
Yeah.
Not in this information that we got, right?
Well,
I didn't see it.
right, so we were asked to explain why we want to use dicot, and we were asked to explain why we don't feel like other options are adequate. And, we weren't asked to explain, how all of this is factoring into next year's. But yes, I do know where we would do them, and I can tell you if you want.
Eric?
No, I was just gonna say, it seemed like one was expense,
Mhm.
that, dicot was the cheapest. And that it seemed like it was gonna provide you relief this summer, and perhaps the other chemicals that could be used as options weren't gonna provide you that relief.
So.
Did I hear that? Is that correct?
Yes, right. If we had used something other than dicot, we wouldn't be able to treat the areas that where it's an issue. We wouldn't, and if we were only using Priscillicor, we could only treat about a fourth of the area where we have the milfoil.
So
And we wouldn't be getting any relief this year.
but you're planning, so just to kind of, you're planning, your request is to use dicot in some locations, Priscillicor in other locations, based on your funds available, and also that gives you a chance to evaluate how both of the contact herbicides work.
Right.
Eric, does it?
I'm listening. I understand the argument about providing relief for the summer. And if, dicot was gonna provide them the relief, that was fine. I'm not sold on, it's the cheapest alternative and therefore that's what we want to use. I would absolutely say no to that. I would say, because that can't be the reason going forward every year that we might want to use dicot because it's the cheapest option.
But
But what I heard this year was, and I heard, it was going to provide relief this year. And, they were going to look and see how, one worked versus the other in certain areas.
dicot and Priscillicor.
Right.
Going forward.
Going forward. But, I'm thinking if they're equivalent, we're still not happy with dicot, so.
But are they equivalent?
I'm more inclined to say yes because it's going to provide them relief this year. I'm inclined to say no in future years if the two are similar and one's simply more expensive than the other, but maybe a little more friendly to the environment than dicot. That's where I'm at.
Okay, Jim?
When we initially spoke with the applicant, their goal was to do echo harvesting. Echo harvesting is a great way to do it if you do it with a rake on the echo harvester, because that pulls up the roots too. But it's the most expensive one. It's more expensive than any of the herbicides because it's all people labor doing this work, whereas all of the treatments of these herbicides are pretty much the same sort of applicator, putting it into the water in the area where you want it to settle, where you want it to treat. And I don't understand why we're hearing that Procelicor wouldn't provide any relief this year. Not only would it provide relief this year, but it would provide relief perhaps well into next year too, because it's a much longer lasting as it kills the roots. Whereas Diquat doesn't. So yes, you would get immediate relief, just like you would with Procelicor, but you wouldn't get killing the roots off, so you would get more of it to grow back. It would probably grow back maybe, I don't know, by the end of the summer or early spring.
So the systemic herbicides act differently, and their time frame is different. They need to be in place for a lot longer, for weeks and months, in order to have an effect, and they don't really have an effect for a couple months.
This is both Diquat and Procelicor.
No, for the Procelicor, the systemic.
Oh, so the
Yeah.
Procelicor takes longer to have an effect.
Have an effect, so it really wouldn't have and provide relief this summer. It takes months for it to really do its thing. But then by next year, it would be doing more than.
There would be less coming back next spring.
That's right, much less coming back next
Kills
spring.
off the plants below ground level.
Right.
Yeah,
So the
Whereas
Diquat
Diquat does not.
gives relief this year, but does not necessarily kill the roots. Procelicor does not give as much relief this year, but would be providing
Right.
relief next year
Right.
because the plants wouldn't go back.
right. And the new Mass GLM says that there are indications that in some Massachusetts lakes, Diquat does have the kind of longer lasting systemic characteristics, even though it is a contact herbicide.
So some of this also is location makes slightly different results from the Diquat, that in some cases, some lakes they're seeing,
It's
it's not black and white.
They didn't indicate what the reason were that
So,
it did.
okay.
But I mean, if we, yeah, I mean, I don't know whether you looked at the cost comparisons, the different scenarios, but we could, so we could do 25 acres with Diquat, 5 acres of Procelicor for our $12,000 budget. If we did it with Endothol, which is the other one that, Massachusetts says is partially successful for variable milfoil and successful for Eurasian milfoil, it would, we'd only be able to do, we couldn't do it all because.
So where are these areas?
Okay, yeah, can you,
They're not on the map. The map
Okay.
just shows Westford and Littleton combined.
Well, so, but.
And where are these ones, then, which part
Okay.
are in Westford?
Yeah, can I just finish this?
The Westford part, I believe.
Yeah. But I mean, just from the numbers you can see, right? If we were to, and by Solitude's experience, Endothol is not very effective at all against milfoil, even though Massachusetts says that it's partially successful against variable and successful against, in their experience, it's not effective at all. But if we did do an Endothol treatment, which neither of them recommended, we'd only be able to do a third of the
We're
area.
talking about that one.
so, because,
Because they could treat this year
Yeah.
without coming back to they could use Endothol this year ineffectively on
So why-
25 on the same 25 acres for twice the cost, or 8 acres for but it's a comparison of what is allowed under the order of conditions, that is not Diquat. And again, they're
This was
looking
the
at,
request that we say,
Endothol might work, but that's not one of the alternatives that you would consider, right?
well, this is what we were asked to explain. We explained why we wanted to do what we're requesting.
he's explaining
And-
what else
And,
they could
and
use.
what other options do we have, and why do we think the
So-
other options are not?
So you've considered the
appropriate.
options besides Diquat.
Right, and.
This is the one
and-
you want.
Yeah.
You're coming before us for
Can
permission.
we, I think, Can we go to look at the map and,
What we asked for is to identify, the number 3 in condition 53, is identify the other authorized herbicides that are effective against the targeted species, not ones that aren't effective against the other species. I don't want to know about those. I only want to know
Well,
about.
I mean, Jim, so this is coming back to the discussion during the amendment, where, we put up this chart, which, and you guys were like, well, we don't know this chart. And I'm like, this is the chart, again, that is in the draft Massachusetts Guide for Lakes Management. It's based off of the final generic environmental impact report, which was prepared by the Department of Conservation and Recreation.
Milfoil.
Right, and so it's these two. So, the only ones that have two CCs are Dicot, 2,4-D,
Right, that's another one.
triclopyr, and fluoroproxifin benzyl. 2,4-D wasn't proposed because it has impacts to public water supply.
Right.
Triclopyr was evaluated and not, again, what was there?
And there's, well, so it's as expensive as Priscillacor, but not as effective as Priscillacor. Endothol has 1C and 1P, so that's why I included that. But in Solitude's experience, it's not nearly as effective. It really is not really very effective against either of the milfoils.
so the two most effective are the Dicot and the Procellacor.
Right. So the.
And so that's why we're talking about those.
And those were the.
What's the
Fluoroproxifin benzyl. That's this one.
The big long one at the end. That's
Okay.
Procellacor.
All right.
Yeah.
So that has a
And-
high level of control with typical application rate. Right? But you're saying that your Solitude, your contractor says it doesn't work?
No,
Right.
Oh.
And the,
Procellacor doesn't.
sorry. Endothol is not.
Let's
Okay.
not talk about it.
So
Right,
the difference-
so both Solitude and DCR recommended using Dicot and Priscillacor.
Okay, so then,
and here's the cost per acre, as provided.
Now, the costs are included up in here. This is the first time we've really seen any cost data, so I did look into that too. Your eco harvesting, which is what you told us is your ultimate goal when you first spoke to us about this project.
Yeah.
That's the most expensive
Yes,
of any of them.
yes,
And you plan on doing that
next year.
next year.
Well-
all those red areas that were on the map?
Yeah, well, so next year we'll have another plant survey to see where the plants are, and that's what we'll treat with the, but yes, we would expect that the same areas will be treated next
And I
year.
think-
Treating with Dicot, you're likely to have the same areas growing back next year.
But we wouldn't let them be
We'll see.
using Dicot next year
Right.
to
Right.
treat
Right.
them.
I mean, but if
we don't-
They'd be having to use
we
something
don't-
You're
else.
applying a chemical that
We don't plan to do herbicides next year, we're doing eco harvesting next year.
You're applying a year's worth of chemical or a year treatment this year with Dicot, a chemical we don't want used. And all for naught because next year it's going to grow back and you're going to have to do something different, which is great. Eco harvesting is great. But that's the most expensive. So
No.
we're using it.
Oh,
Yes, it is.
eco-harvesting
Yes, it
is-
Eco-harvesting is the most
But
expensive.
you would have been
Whereas
doing
Dicot is
eco
like the
harvesting this
cheapest.
year if it hadn't been for the dredging permit, right?
Yes.
So basically, they were hamstrung not being able to do eco harvesting this year, so they're trying to get relief
I
somehow.
get it.
Okay.
And using this one is not a good idea. It doesn't provide you much in the way of relief. I mean, typically, if you're going to use it year-round, it's going to take you, you're going to do 1 to 2 times per year.
So in our experience on Nab Lake and Long Saukor Pond, where more specifically Nab, which has, I guess both do have milfoils. Management only occurs once a year for the herbicide, for the aquatic vegetation.
So once a year with Dicot is sufficient for now?
Yes, because they've also managed it over time, they initially, have managed it with fluoridone in the past and gotten it to a density with which can be managed, with, again, they also have other invasive species that, are present but not as problematic.
I'd just rather see the much.
Okay, so
Less
Jim is
expensive.
opposed.
So, and DCR.
I mean, we're not,
We have to move it.
Can we,
Priscilla, of course, 9 times more expensive than, so we can,
Still it's cheaper. Still it's cheaper than,
Relief this
still
year
it's
that they're
cheaper.
looking for.
Right.
still it's cheaper than eco harvesting.
Can we
Jim,
look-
I've tried to get
Okay.
them to do something
Can we-
different besides eco
can we
harvesting
look-
for 4 years.
Can we look at the map so we get a sense of where so that we have the context of where they're planning to do the work? Or where they would propose to do the work?
In Westford.
Oh, I see,
In
that's to
Westford.
hold it in. So, the expectation would be that we would use Priscilla here.
So those,
That's in Westford along so.
Westford,
Along the railroad track.
yeah,
And
all the way to the end of the Westford area, up to the Forge Beach area.
Mhm.
And we would use the dicot for this, up to here. And we would see how much we could do here. We might leave this untreated to see how does the harvesting work there next year for an untreated area.
so actually you're not,
So all of the waterfronts that, on the lake are in this area here, which we would be treating with the dicot.
okay.
There are no waterfronts over here, so this is a good area to use the Priscilla because it provides relief for these people for this year.
And where you use the Priscilla it will go after the roots.
Yeah,
But it's not water, it's not the area where you would want to be providing benefit to,
right. We'd be using a dicot in the areas where people have waterfronts, and we'd be providing them with relief for the summer.
okay, and Procore would be the
Priscilla
other
would
area,
be over here where there aren't any waterfronts.
where there aren't any waterfronts, but you'd still like to
Because
be
they
able
don't
to
need
take.
the immediate relief.
Right, but they are,
And we'll see how it works next year compared to the other.
and if it's effective in reducing the population, then there's less need to eco harvest there next year.
Right. And if it's less, and so, depending on, so we have been told that, sort of this combination of, herbicides and eco harvesting can improve the efficiency of effectiveness of the eco harvesting, or, together they can do a better job than the eco harvesting alone.
Okay.
And we're not convinced that eco harvesting is right. We've tried it twice, and we've been hamstrung both times, and it's been very late in the season both times. Next year, we hope that we are planning to have a large treatment that's early enough in the year to make a difference. And that'll be our,
Management.
So it's
that'll be
not
our,
like-
Were there mechanical problems with the harvesters?
yes, but they had enough of them that they could give us the time they needed. It was a question of permits, making it late. First year, our budget was small. The second year, we were restricted by DEP, how much we could take out. We only take out 100 cubic yards.
And when you do the eco harvesting, is that gonna have a rake system or just clip off?
No, it's not clipping. It's got rollers that pull it.
Does it have a rake that pulls out the
No.
roots too?
Well, it has two rollers, and the plants come into it, and it pulls it. And
So it could
ideally,
remove the roots, it may snap off.
some of the roots get pulled, some of them break halfway or partway down. But it's not a
But
cutter.
the rake's the most efficient.
Okay.
It's not a cutter.
Okay, so
To make it easy.
Okay, so back to the request to use dicot on the lakefront property side and Priscilla on the area closest to the train tracks. Are there other questions that people need to ask before we start coming up with a motion? Okay, so can I have a motion to approve the request to use dicot in the area outlined or described and Priscilla in the other area described during the summer of 2025?
So moved.
Can I have a second? Okay. All those in favor? Aye. All those opposed? Okay.
Okay.
But the reason I'm doing it is because it provides relief this year. And it seems like the following year, they're gonna do, pulling.
They will go back to other techniques.
And hopefully we won't have to use this in the future. But I mean, coming to us when they are right now, this seems to be the only viable option.
We don't have an actual plan that shows where DIQUOT's going to be used.
I mean, I can get that tomorrow.
But if we have that, that'll be valuable next year when you come back and we do the.
I mean, it's the entire
Well,
shoreline.
but actually, what are the things?
I'm coming back.
No, but at the end of the season, will you give us a report on how things work?
Tell me the cost of.
Okay, you know what? We're getting really
All right,
late.
never mind.
Yes.
But yes, I think the cost will be something that's in the report that you give us at the
Yeah.
end of the season.
Yeah.
Okay,
Okay. Thank you very much.
thank you.
Appreciate it.
Moving on to our 7:40 PM agenda item, it's a public hearing for Seal Harbor LLC Loon Way Extension right-of-way.
Under Massachusetts General Law, Chapter 131, Section 40, the Wetlands Protection Act, and Westford's non-zoning wetlands bylaw, Chapter 171, the Westford Conservation Commission will hold a public hearing on Wednesday, July 9th, 2025, at 7:40 PM in Meeting Room 201 at Town Hall, 55 Main Street, to consider the request for determination of applicability application of Mark Gallagher for the installation and extension of underground utility mains, lines, and repaving of Loon Way extension within an unnumbered Groton Road parcel 0 Lot Z, Loon Way, and 0 Lot 8, Groton Road. Assessors map 41, parcel 55, lot 19, parcel 2, lot 17, and map 77, parcel 104, lot 100, portions of which are within 100 feet of bordered vegetated wetlands and a certified vernal pool.
Good evening.
Good evening. My name is Jonathan Silverstein. I'm counsel for the applicant.
Matt Stengel from Latin Consultants.
Maybe I'll just set the table and then you can walk through the plan. So Seal Harbor has two lots known as Lot 7, Lot 8 that have been approved for a common driveway by the planning board. The reason that we saw it and that the planning board approved the common driveway is because though Lot 7 has direct frontage onto Groton Road, to put a driveway out to Groton Road not only would be less safe because it would add another curb cut, it would also involve clearing a very long swath of existing forested area to get to Groton Road as opposed to a much shorter stretch of forested area of the existing lot to meet up with the driveway out to Loon Way extension, which is a private way that Lot 8 fronts on. So the planning board approved that special permit on condition that the applicant make some improvements to Loon Way extension, which although it is a private way, is not laid out as a public way, is and always has been open to the public, is commonly traveled by the public. On one end is Groton Road, a public way. On the other end is Loon Way, a public way. And so the planning board is a condition of approving the common driveway special permit. Asked Seal Harbor, and Seal Harbor agreed to do these roadway improvements to Loon Way extension. The area of improvement is, I think, entirely, if not almost entirely, already paved. And so these are really, but it's not in great shape. It's not maintained by anyone. So the idea is to make it safer, to repave it. I think drainage will get a little better, and it will be maintained going forward by the homeowners association for the common driveway. So seemed like a win all around. We, of course, had to come in and run this by the commission, which is what we've done with this request for a negative determination of applicability. We're not disturbing any previously undisturbed areas. We're really just cleaning up, improving an existing roadway, making it safer, and it's all in service of a common driveway that's going to avoid, it's going to dramatically decrease impervious area, decrease tree clearing of existing forested area, and so that's why we're before you. I'll ask Matt in a minute to sort of walk you through the plan, but I did want to mention, we got some feedback, I think maybe through you, Matt?
Yes.
That there were some concerns about, well, is there, someday will the owners of these lots perhaps try to cut off public access since it's not a public way? Is the town going to continue to have access? Of course, the town owns land on the other side of this private way. And so I got in touch with Jeff Morset and said, look, we get it. Let's put any concern about this to bed. We will, and I prepared a draft agreement, and it's going to be reviewed by town council, and we'll agree to a condition of approval that says before we convey any of the lots out to buyers, we'll enter into an agreement with the town covenanting that we're never going to block access. The improvements are going to be solely at our expense, or not at the town's expense, and we will make sure that this goes on record, and so any concerns about potential blocked access to the town's land or to the public in the future will be resolved. So Mr. Morset indicated he agreed with that approach, was comfortable with the language of the condition. I know he reported that to Matt.
Yep.
And so we would propose and accept a condition on a negative determination that we enter into such an agreement as shown in that proposed condition there. So I'll pause there if you have any questions now, or if you want Matt to walk you through the plan. It is, of course, the commission's prerogative.
I got no question, just walk us through the plan.
Okay, yeah, I mean, in full disclosure, what I had raised the concern because what I could see is that the existing roadway as it is goes across land that is owned by the Lakeside Meadows. It's under conservation restriction. There's actually a parcel that's town land, and so that was part of my, normally town land stays open to the public.
Absolutely.
So that was just where my questions were coming from. So thank you for the answer. Matt?
Okay, so the work within the wetland buffers is limited only to, could you pass me the laser pointer right there? Perfect, thank you. So this is the 100-foot wetland buffer. There's existing pavement. Now, if you drive down this road, it's not exactly continuous pavement. A lot of it has been broken up over the years. There's large, like 10-foot diameter potholes. It's definitely in bad shape. But there is existing pavement that goes all the way from the Loon Way right-of-way over to Groton Road. We will be removing the pavement from the end of Loon Way to the northern end of our so-called frontage on this road, and that will get a full depth of base and pavement, and then from the end of our frontage to Groton Road, we will be patching the potholes, putting down a leveling course, and then a finishing course of pavement for the rest of that up to Groton Road. And then for utilities, we are, thank you, Matt, tying into water service, a water main in Loon Way and into the underground electric in Loon Way, and trenching along the side of the road. Water will terminate in front of Lot 8. There's proposing a flushing hydrant at the end of the water line, and then the underground electric goes all the way up to the common driveway and then enters the property. But that's really the extent of the work that's inside the wetland buffers. If you have any questions, happy to answer.
Commissioners have any questions? So,
Just a couple things to add. The erosion controls are proposed on the wetland side of the existing pavement. The limit of the existing pavement is being held. There's a little bit additional pavement being added in kind of a little narrow choke point right before the buffer to the wetland and vernal pool. But otherwise, no alteration is occurring closer to the wetland resource than is existing.
so the extent of improvements to the roadway base, et cetera, it sounds like the property owners are expected to come in through Lakeside Meadows, and that will be their primary access, and that the longer stretch up is just for ease of emergency vehicle access.
Yes.
They can get in much faster that way rather than zigging through the neighborhood, through Lakeside.
I believe that's the intent.
Okay. Jim?
Just a question on the placement of the conservation posts. I realize that, what's that, 100 feet, right?
Yes.
It just seems kind of strange. You're sitting at the house, looking across the yard to see where the road is, and the conservation land is essentially the road. I know it isn't. I know it's beyond, the resource we're protecting is beyond that. Would it make sense in this case to actually move the conservation post to roughly where the,
So whereas this is a certified vernal pool, I would
We would want to keep the 100-foot buffer.
maintain the 100-foot buffer.
Looks like it's
per
in the
the
woods
line.
anyway, Jim.
Right, this is existing vegetation.
Yeah.
So, I mean, yes, you're gonna be looking across your septic system.
It just seems to me, you get the line, it's all right, okay.
So-
I forgot the vernal pool up there, that makes sense. Never mind,
But you,
withdrawn.
He's good.
yeah, but you bring up a good question, though, is,
No, I don't bring up any questions. No question.
there's been some clearing, there's dumping, et cetera, and it's, looking at here, we see where the property line is. And so this area that's showed as inside the tree line is, how heavily, is that fully vegetated naturally?
I think at some point it was. I drove by there today and I did notice that there was some, I was out here to do soil testing for the stormwater systems a few months ago, and I didn't notice that, there was a lot of debris that was dumped kind of right inside this area.
That was gonna be raised as a, friendly enforcement order with the applicant as things progress out there to clean that up, renaturalize it,
What?
especially where it is. And, if they want to put up no dumping signs, wouldn't probably hurt.
Well, and I'm thinking is, once that area's been cleaned up, is native plantings in the buffer zone, that's the kind of thing we like to see, and that potentially also provides the homeowner with some nice screening from the traffic going. Not that there's gonna be a lot of traffic going by, but just, yeah, that would be a nice,
Now, is that something that you would want to address with the RDA or with
No,
the enforcement
I
order
think
that you were?
a friendly enforcement,
Okay.
order, where we can kind of talk through and figure out what the overall intent is. And again,
Just so everyone knows, we don't own the property yet. We have it under agreement. So, but we're going to be closing
okay, so
very soon.
what you're saying is that right now, you're doing the work, the planning, et cetera, to get this approved, but it's in anticipation of purchasing it once the approval's over.
Closing is imminent. We obviously want to get our approvals
Okay.
in place. So
Okay,
not to say, I didn't do it, but we
Okay.
don't own the property, and I'm sure before we
oh, that dumping's been
sell,
there
we're
for
gonna,
ages.
we're gonna wanna clean all that out and
Yeah.
make it look nice.
Okay. So, any questions from members of the audience? Can I have a motion to issue?
And just two conditions for the commission's consideration. One, the volunteered language as was shown on the screen and provided by Attorney Silverstein, and also that the erosion controls be inspected prior to installation, or upon installation prior to work commencing.
So you're making it a conditional or a negative with those conditions?
Negative with those conditions.
Okay.
Can I have a motion to issue a conditional negative determination of applicability?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Can I have a motion to close the public hearing?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, Matt, you got something for us to sign? Okay. Moving on to our next 7:40 PM agenda item, to continuation of public hearing for Hartnett, 17 Beatrice Road.
As nothing was ready at the time of the packet being prepared, they requested to continue to the commission's July 23rd meeting.
May I have a motion to continue the public hearing to July 23rd?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. What a modification request for Buttrick, Lot 3 Pacific Lane.
This was a minor modification request before the commission at their last meeting. The engineer of record, upon returning to the office the next day, provided the septic plan, which shows the proposed house location and grading in very great detail. Again, all within the existing limits of work. The commission wanted a plan showing kind of the grading with it as well. If there are any questions, I'd be happy to answer.
Any questions? Can I have a motion to approve the minor modification request for Lot 3 Pacific Lane?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, point with Bobby's Ranch.
I do not have an update on that at this time.
Okay. Discuss and issue enforcement order for 27 Tenney Road.
I do not have an update on that at this time either.
Minor modification request for Thompson, 18 Dana Drive.
This plan was received and provided to the commission this afternoon, similarly to the other minor modification request. This was related to the property owner's request to install fencing around the property line and the existing lawn area. And the commission's direction at the meeting, as what was reviewed was an annotated plan, was they wanted the proposed limit of fencing shown on the approved plan as prepared by the project engineer, which has been provided. It is consistent with what was originally presented to the commission a couple meetings ago. If there are any questions, I'd be happy to answer.
This looks right to you, Jim? I don't remember.
Yeah.
So if there are no questions from the commission, can I have a motion to approve the minor modification request for 18 Dana Drive?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay,
Discussion.
discussion and action items.
The first is my attempt of a coup. Sorry. As the full commission is not here tonight, I would recommend tabling this discussion item until the full board, full commission is here.
August 13th?
Potentially August 13th or thereafter, again, depending
Okay.
on if other people are out.
Well, okay. So,
I do not have an update on 20 Keys Road discussion for enforcement.
Do you don't?
Does
I
it?
do not.
Okay. You won't go.
As with regard to the Stony Brook conservation area, in conversations with Jim before the meeting, there haven't been any calls to police dispatch for the property, and I know I'm going to regret saying this.
There's been a couple over Williams. Yeah.
That is. Exactly. And so, just kind of an update on that. But also, I have been, the Teamworks, management for the Teamworks camp reached out looking to kind of, they were asking about the 5-year kind of renewal of the contract. I've kind of followed it up with them, explaining, I think it would be good for them to come to, before the, come meet with the commission, kind of discuss the concerns, and see if there are, ways forward with the contract.
The big sticking point was the
Traffic.
traffic.
Yep.
And we didn't really get a hard number from Westford Land Preservation Foundation, how many cars and vehicles per day, per morning, per afternoon, whatever they want to limit. What are the limits we got to stick with? Because they can't go to 0, because they got to bring in food and supplies and things like that. And maybe they're going to use buses. I don't know how they're going to get the kids in there, whoever's going to be operated. But it's a question. We don't know how restrictive is it going to be on the applicant.
Right, and so, again, right now they're asking about, the 5, this is the 5th year of their current, of the agreement, they're asking about, the next 5, 6 through 10. And, I want to have them come before the commission, discuss, is there a possibility for an extension? Is there not, is the commission not, seeking to renew the contract and go out for an RFP? Again, just so that they can prepare for it as well, kind of prepare on their end as well. So that, I've offered up, see if they're available at either the next 2 commission meetings. So, we can kind of move forward with that and, kind of have some face time, because I think the discussion is best done, in person.
We had meetings with them, and that was the sticking point. That one topic, that was it.
Right.
So it's still going to be, I think.
And but I want to have that conversation with the full board.
We don't know where we're going to negotiate from, or where we can negotiate to, because we don't know what Westford Land Preservation Foundation is imposing on us. Just that they want way less. To what? I don't know.
But also one of the things is, if we have a change in the CR grantee,
That could take a week or a month or years.
But
I don't know.
But they may come in with different limits than Land Preservation Foundation. They may give us different directives, but one of the things is, if we're having difficulty coming to a meeting of the minds with Teamworks, should we be starting to work on an RFP going out for bid? Because that RFP we would take out for bid might also give us the framework for continuing for discussing with Teamworks the option of moving forward, what we would look for from them to go forward with them, because we're going to need that information if we end up having to go out and look for somebody else.
That's it.
I think we need from Westford Land Preservation Foundation.
What'd you say?
No, I don't want to deal with Sudbury Valley trustees yet, because they don't have the conservation restriction. The Land Preservation Foundation does. They're the ones that have told us so far that the traffic was out of control too much. What is allowable? That's what we need to know. Otherwise, how do we negotiate with Teamworks?
Yeah,
We write an RFP.
I can ask and kind of get that,
You can get
Try-
that
try-
offline.
trying to get them, get
Try and
an
get a definitive.
Then we bring that up with Teamworks at the meeting, and they say, oh my gosh, we'll never be able to meet that. And then we start working an RFP. Or they may say, well, maybe we have some ways to do that, in which case maybe we just modify the current contract.
But, and that would also be very helpful to know if
it's acceptable.
if it's got to go into the RFP.
Right,
Because-
I mean, if it's gonna be information that we need to know with Teamworks, to extend it, it's gonna be something in the RFP. So it
Yeah.
serves a dual purpose, so
Yes.
I understood.
One number, one figure, one description.
Yeah.
Would help for both options.
Something in black and white.
Yep.
Okay.
Onto the repairs, I've not reached out to the vendor that Jim had identified. Nor do I have anything to report on the Edwards Woods.
No, with Edwards Woods, was was step one going to be,
Try to get a sign up, and step 2 was to get cameras.
okay, and then step 3 was going to get a survey?
Guess so.
Okay. Thank you.
Don't have any update on the Freedom Park improvements, specifically the survey of its westerly lot line. Although letters have gone out and I haven't heard any, nobody has reached back out to me. So I don't.
But we have a signed PO, we have a
Yep,
vendor,
yep,
a
they've.
contractor
yep,
in place,
they've-
so it will happen.
It should.
It should happen if they want to.
I'll reach out, see what they, see where they are. I do not have an update on the Summer Village CR amendment. Right now, with respect to the Long Sauffer Pond fireworks sampling, our environmental consultants are aware of the time frame for when the fireworks are proposed, and so they'll do the pre-sampling, the baseline sampling, and the post in their schedule. And lastly, I do not have an update for the Jarvis Hill.
I can't hear you.
I don't have an update for the Jarvis Hill conservation restriction.
Okay.
Okay.
Did anybody have any comments or changes or corrections to the June 11th?
I didn't. They're very well written, by the way. Who
May I have
does
a
our
motion?
minutes?
Was there, I think there was an of that should
Oh,
have been
yes,
an
there
of.
was an editorial.
Yeah, there was an of that should have been, that should,
I missed it.
Margaret did.
An of that should have been an off.
Yeah. I forget.
Beatrice.
Beatrice, where am
I missed that.
Um,
Who does our minutes?
I? A resident.
Okay,
And-
but it
and-
is, okay.
Yeah, and Sierra and I
No,
reviewed.
no, that was the 25th meeting.
Oh, there was nothing on the 11th? Sorry.
No.
Okay.
Can I have a motion to approve the minutes for June 11th, 2024?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. On the 25th meeting, it was the top of page 2.
What'd you find?
Fourth line down.
Yeah.
I didn't find it.
Oh, yeah, I saw that too. but I
A few
didn't
feet
see
of
what
the tight tank was a few feet, should be read, a few feet off the existing shed wall and basin.
I did, it.
And then the other one I had was on page 3, the enforcement order for CSX. There was a statement that said there were 2 instances when Gaza was allowed to observe and monitor spraying, and looking at the findings, it only appeared to say that you only once have been able to.
At least 2 times, I know that.
So in 2022, because 23 and 25 you couldn't. 23 was the
It would have been
waiver.
22 and 24.
I know I've done it at least 2 times.
Okay, fine, okay, because it just, the findings
And I shut out.
mentioned once you could, when you could, and didn't mention a second time, so that was why I questioned it.
It was probably pre-CSX, it was probably
Pan Am?
Pan Am Railway back then. First time was Pan Am, and subsequently CSX.
So possibly even pre-2021.
Could have been.
Okay. Okay, then can I have a motion? So the only the only change that I had was of replaced by off. Can I have a motion to approve the minutes for June 25th, 2025 as amended?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
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 And the site visits to recorder schedule. And then motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.